years. Not in this building, but we are very happy to be in this historical building now since around 20 years, that is still a family-owned building. And we are also, I would say, in the cultural heart of Colombo. In the same street is the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, the Indian Cultural Center. In the next street you have the University of Visual Arts. You have the new premises of the Jeffrey Barber Trust, Saskia Fernando Gallery, Alliance Française, and many more cultural institutions. And today we are showing a film that is presented by the American Institute for Lankan Studies in Colombo. I'm very grateful for that. The film about Gananath Obeyesekere, In Search of Buddhist Conscience, by Dimutu Saman-Wetasinghe. A documentary of the life and work of this eminent scholar, a pioneering thinker in anthropology and Buddhist studies, who passed away on 25th of March in 25. The film screening is followed by a discussion moderated by Professor Charles Hallisey, Jehan Numata Senior Lecturer on Buddhist Literatures from the Harvard Divinity School. And I'm also very happy that Dimutu Saman-Wetasinghe, the film director, is today with us. Thanks a lot to the American Institute for Lankan Studies and its team for giving us this opportunity. And for the film buffs among you, we have a monthly film forum on Sri Lankan movies every first Wednesday in the month, organized by Agenda 14, our partner in film. I wish you an inspiring afternoon, and now I would like to hand over to Ramla. Where is she? She's coming. Okay.
My name is Ramla Wahab Salman, and I'm the Executive Director of the American Institute for Lankan Studies, based in Colombo 6. At the very outset, I'd like to extend my thanks to the Goethe Institute for making this collaboration and event possible, especially to its director, Mr. Stefan Winkler, and Ms. Marie Wallow and Jan Ramesh for their assistance in putting together the logistics for today. To provide a brief introduction to our center and what we do, the American Institute for Lankan Studies, that is the center based in Colombo, was set up in 2001 and maintains a thematic focus on historiography, anthropology, art history, and museum studies. And through this lens, we regularly organize workshops, reading groups, conferences, and develop a wide range of research resources, including guides to physical and digital libraries, tools for conducting ethical research in Sri Lanka, and best practices for international research on Sri Lanka. Our specialist research library, located at our space in Colombo 6, is dedicated to Sri Lanka studies, and you may access our library catalog through our website at aisls.org or simply search for us online. Today's film, directed by Dimutu Saman-Wetasinghe, explores the life and scholarly contributions of the late iconic Professor Gananath Obeyesekere, who was a graduate of Peradeniya University and taught for many decades at Princeton University and chose to retire in Kandy. The documentary runs for 1 hour and 42 minutes and features both English and Sinhala subtitles. Our institute supported and was involved in the subtitling process of this documentary. Following the screening, Professor Charles Hallisey will lead and moderate a discussion. Professor Hallisey teaches at Harvard University and is the past president of the American Institute for Sri Lankan Studies, based in the US. During the discussion, we welcome questions in English, Sinhala, and Tamil, which my colleagues Diniti Ratnayaka and Dorina Punyamurthy will translate as required. And thank you once again for your presence at today's screening, and enjoy your evening.
One of the things of watching it that I was very much aware of is that it's an extraordinary film insofar as it gives an excellent introduction to like the range and the depth of Gananath Obeyesekere's thinking. But for those of us who had the privilege, the chance to know him, it's an extraordinary film simply because, at least for me, it caused once again the feelings of what it was like to be in Gananath's presence. I knew Gananath Obeyesekere for more than 40 years. I can say that one of the many attributes that he had is that he was a very careful and serious listener. When you were with him, oftentimes he was very keen to listen to what someone else had to say. But what you can see from watching the film, that to be in his presence when he started to talk, you just did not want to interrupt, and you did not want it to stop. You just wanted to sit there and let it continue in any way that he decided to. There were always characteristic flourishes where he would wave his hand and say, and so on and so on. Or he would smile and go in another direction. I wanted to say that very strong feeling of watching the movie, just having the feeling once again of, oh, this was what it was like to be in Gananath Obeyesekere's presence. Makes me very grateful to Dumatu Watasingha to give to people in the future the chance to have some kind of semblance of what it was like. It won't be like what it was like to be in front of the whole person, but you could see something of just how magnetic, charismatic he could be. And since part of that experience of being in his presence is that you didn't want to say anything, you didn't want to stop him thinking in the way that he was going. And since I am overwhelmed with that feeling of not wanting to say anything, is why I'm going to take very seriously that I'm moderating the discussion. And I have no discussion. I'm not leading a discussion. I am not commenting on the film. And above all, what I'm not going to do is if someone says, did Obeyesekere think X or did he think Y? One of the things that I would say I learned was that I would never imagine myself as someone who would be able to say in front of Gananath Obeyesekere, this is what you think. I can just say that I had the fear that if I did that, he would tell me, no, it's the opposite of what you think. And I might be surprised and say, opposite? And he would say something like 180 degrees opposite and show me how that I was wrong. So at this I want to just open to the floor. People may want to make comments on the film. They may want to give acclaim and praise to the director of the film, to Dumatu Watasingha. I'm amazed at what he was able to collect. I was amazed at the people that he found to kind of comment on things. I was amazed at just the pleasure of seeing films and listening to Gananath, to have films and photos of Gananath at different stages of his life. in which you remember, oh, that's what he looked like when he was 70. That's what he looked like when he was. It's along the lines, my mother lived to be very, very old. She died when she was 103. At a certain point in my life, I realized I could not remember what she looked like when I was a child. When I remembered my childhood, I would remember myself as 5 years old, but she was 103 years old walking around with me as a 5-year-old. So when I see photographs of her, I say, oh, that's what she looked like. That's what she was like. It was the same thing to see some videos of Gananath 20 years ago talking, and just the sheer power of the mind that was present when he began to speak. So again, to say comments, acclaim, other people can, if there's questions, other people can try to answer or dare to answer, but also that there may be things that people want to direct to Dumato Weta Singha or to other people who are here. So anyone. Translations into other languages.
This is to start the discussion going, and for no other reason. I was a student in the Department of Sociology when Professor Gananath Obeyesekere was teaching. I just want to say I like the film very much. A very excellent film, and you see the great deal of trouble that this director would have had to go through to get that range. I like it, and I'll give it 10 marks out of 10 just to get the conversation going, discussion going.
Gets a bit boring after a while seeing him, but they had the soundtrack behind and the people speaking, and I think that was a very good way of presenting the data because it never got boring at all. I knew Gananath at Princeton when I was a postdoc at the Institute for Advanced Study, and he was like a father figure to all of us. I was just a young postdoc at that time.
For nearly 40 years. And when he died, a young colleague of mine said, you must have known him. What was he like? And I paused and kind of thought, can I really say this? I said, I think he might have been the most charismatic person I ever met in my life. And so it's a measure of the quality of the... But then, you're stumped as to how you can demonstrate that quality to somebody else who had never actually met him. But now we have the raw material. If anybody challenges that claim, we can just show that film, and if anybody's unconvinced that he might be the most charismatic person they've ever come across, then they should just watch the film. The film is wonderful. It's particularly wonderful, I think, because of the remarkably comprehensive take on Gananath's very, very long career, and the very kind of scrupulous way it's worked with the interview material and so on. I have a kind of question or a suggestion for the filmmakers, having spent a little time myself rummaging around in the early history of anthropological research in Sri Lanka, looking at Edmund Leach's archive, for example. There was so much in that was new to me, stuff that I'd never seen before, didn't know. And I was wondering if it would be possible somehow to archive some of the interview material, the full interviews that were done for the film, not just the clips that we see in the films, because it would be an absolutely astonishing resource for future researchers wanting to know about that time.
Memorized a lot of poetry. And he was very skilled and gifted at reciting poetry at appropriate moments. Maybe about 10 years ago or 8 years ago, Ranjani Obeyesekere and Gananath Obeyesekere rented a house of my neighbors across the street from where I live in Boston. My neighbor was away for the summer and they were subletting. But one day when I was coming home, I passed a yard in which there was what I thought was a beautiful sunflower blooming in the yard. And I was so moved by the sunflower that when I got home, I went across the street to find Ranjani and Gananath and said, you must come and see this sunflower. So then the three of us walked to where the sunflower was. Gananath looked at it and started to recite the poem from William Blake, "O sunflower weary of time that follows the course of the sun." But while I was listening, I was looking at the sunflower, and then I realized it was plastic, not a real. And so that what would have been an embarrassing moment of how bad my eyes had become or how inattentive I am, instead became this moment that prompted Gananath to start to recite William Blake. But the pleasure was he sometimes would recite in English, sometimes in Sinhala, and it was just like intimidating how much he had memorized and how much he could remember.
Just to keep the conversation going, seeing people, I've been psychoanalyzing him as well for the past 1.5 hours. And what I felt was part of his charm is gotten from, I feel like he's someone who was born and bred in a village, and then he moved to this cosmopolitan. And he's equally good in like Sinhala as well as he is in English and literature. Like he's proficient in both cultures and both languages. And that made him like very Sinhalese as well as very, westernized as well. And that is a charm, and that's a mixture that you cannot resist. I feel like that's the part of, that's the source of his charm, I feel like. He's effortlessly Sinhala and effortlessly English. So, yeah.
I've known him. I've known him from the early 50s, when I was at Peradeniya. And my first acquaintance was when I had not done any reference for some tutorial set by the English department. And I saw him standing there, and someone told me, why don't you ask him? He is a lecturer, he is a student, final year student in the English department. So I walked up to him and said, Gananath, can you tell me the main things about this poem? And he said, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this, it's this. And I got a shock because it was something that he must have done, say, 3 years before. And the way he just knew it, he had a fantastic mind. He could retain all these things. I was shocked, and this was talking on the corridor of Arunachal Hall, where he was made, I think, sub-warden in my first year. So it was, and also looking at him, he didn't seem to talk about Shakespeare or talk about anything cultural there. But we also heard that he was a person who had gone to the villages, that we all knew, and recorded folk songs. And he was a very friendly person, but always seemed to be, up there talking to 1 or 2 people only, not coming down and mixing with all of us. And then I wondered why. And I came to the conclusion that he must have been a great reader. He hadn't the time, I think, to. He was reading most of the time and walking, I suppose, when he left Peradeniya, and doing a lot of work. And that is why when I heard that he had become interested in anthropology and that he had left Peradeniya, the department there also, and gone to the States, I knew that deep down he was an authentic Sri Lankan. Authentic for this reason. There are a lot of us Sri Lankans who talk about being nationalistic. He was nothing of the sort. He was a person who simply was a human being who was quite comfortable in both cultures, in Western and Eastern culture. He was very, very comfortable. And he made us feel that that is what he should be. So that he didn't talk about decolonization. No. He never made any big statements. All his big statements actually were trying to rebuild any erroneous ideas we had about the East and about colonialism and about the injustice of colonialism, written in a very deep way. And that is why I appreciate this film, because to me, this film told Sri Lanka who Gananath Obeyesekere really was. In Sri Lanka, he is not accepted even today. People don't know him. They think that he went to Oxford, to Princeton and came back. So what? So many have gone and come. But that's all. They have not read his books. So I'm very glad that we have this, and I hope that the general public in Sri Lanka can see this film. It's and tells us exactly what to become. What to become. The world needs people like this to tell us not to be superficially become Easterners or superficially become Westerners. No, but to be deep down something like what Gananath was. And then you become a true human being. I've gone to his house. I've gone and had dinners with him and his wonderful family. And we have discussed things. And then when I talk to him, it's so simple. You can't imagine that he has all this going on in his life. He drops all that and he takes a bottle of wine, has a fine dinner with you and talks on almost anything. Such a simple person. So I'm very glad I saw this, and I must thank the German Goethe Institute for allowing the American Institute in Colombo for Sri Lankan studies to show this film here. I think that this country needs people, authentic scholars who are not also limited scholars, like most of our scholars are. So limited. There must be people like this, and then perhaps Sri Lanka will not only get out of its bankruptcy in economics, in the economic state, but I think it's bankruptcy in the intellectual fields too. So let us hope that there will be more Gananath Obeyesekere. Just before I finish, I want to say that when I was at St. Thomas's College, and I knew Gananath as a senior there, and people like S.J. Tambaya, who went to Harvard, I think, and became a sociologist there, a professor. Sri Lanka produced people who were balanced, absolutely balanced, who didn't want to, sell language or religion or anything and become someone. In fact, the way he one day, I went for a funeral and he stood by my side and he said, hey, when I die, I want just a simple wooden box with planks, not this. That was the type of mind he had, always trying to find some truth in our living and trying to be as simple as possible. Thank you.
So this is a fabulous film. And so now, having watched it and praising the film, all of us need to go out and tell other people that this film should be shown at the Cannes Film Festival. It should be getting Academy Awards or things from the British Film Institute as a way of just doing justice not only to Gananath but to the director of the film, to just say, oh, it's a remarkable thing. And the director of the film needs royalties too. So that's something. I do want to say one thing though, that Gananath Obeyesekere did have a fabulous memory, but he could also be forgetful. So there was one time when he was giving a very big, important lecture at Harvard University, and I had told him I would pick him up at the airport to drive him, and he would give the lecture the next day. But 20 minutes before I was going to leave for the airport, he called me and he said, I was just writing a check and I thought I was coming tomorrow, but when I wrote the day, I realized that I was supposed to come today and I've missed the plane. And so he said, I'll go to the airport and I'll call you when I find what my plane is. So later that night, I picked him up at the airport. When he got into the car, he said to me, I thought this lecture was all finished. But when I took out my folder about it on the plane, I saw it was just a bunch of notes on a napkin. So then I said to him, it's okay, you have until tomorrow afternoon, so you have lots of time to prepare, and I'll take you to the guest house now. But then about 7 in the morning the next day, he called me up and he said, do you have any scissors and tape? And I said, yes. And he said, can you bring it to me? I need to tape this lecture together. And I said, oh, okay. But I have to take my children to school first. And then a few minutes later, he called again. And he said, do you have any aspirin? And I said, yes. And he said, can you bring it when you bring the scissors and tape? And then when he gave the lecture, he opened up and he said, this is a work in progress that I'm sharing with you. And if Charles Hallisey hadn't brought me scissors and tape, it wouldn't have been put together by now. So this is just, it's not in the film, but he did forget things.
Of dismantling the Buddhist consciousness, which was built by stories, myths. I keep wondering, and I've been wondering for some time now, whether it's people's observations that had led to the myths and the stories, and then the consciousness. And in this process, where we've dismantled that we've stopped that the observational skills. I wonder what you people think about it.
So this isn't at me. When I'm teaching in a classroom, I have the luxury to point to someone else and say, how would you answer that question? But just a few things for me to say. One of the things that I think is wonderful about the film is how it kind of highlights and thematizes this quality of Gananath Obeyesekere's thinking under the theme of conscience. Gananath was very, very sophisticated and careful about how he thought about human persons. And in the discussion of his work on Medusa's hair that spoke about how symbols tapped into things that were important to individuals, it was an important aspect. And then another thing that tapped into kind of shared problems, shared concerns. But there was this other dimension to the Buddhist whatever that is usually referred to as conscience. And we could see it, one can see it in Gananath Obeyesekere's own life and his scholarship, that the conscience is a voice that when something is in front of you, when you hear something, you say, this is so wrong. And that it is so wrong that I have to do something about this. So that we could see this in the whole debate with Marshall Solins, which was very, very difficult for Gananath at times because of the criticism that was heaped on him. But at the source of it was that the argument that Solins was making wasn't just an academic argument for Gananath. It was like morally wrong. It wasn't just intellectually wrong, it was morally wrong. And that listening to that and showing that, scholarship also needs to listen to conscience. We say, it's one of the great legacies for me of Gananath Obeyesekere as a scholar. Sometimes, what I say to my students, that they may say, he was a great anthropologist who happened to be a Buddhist. And instead I said, no, he's a great Buddhist thinker who happened to be an anthropologist. And that they are not interconnected. But he really did think very seriously with the ideas and feelings and what he knew about a Buddhist heritage in Sri Lanka. And so when he spoke about a Buddhist conscience, it's very easy to say it is an academic conscience. And it's what he is modeling is something to say, what we need from our universities today in Sri Lanka, and definitely in my own country, the United States, we need to have people in universities who have a voice in which they say, this is so wrong, and are not afraid of the reactions of what people say. We're just out of time for the discussion, and I don't want to miss the chance to ask, even though he is hiding behind people, to ask Dumatu Wettasinger to come up, so simply so that I in public can thank him for what is a marvelous film, and all of us can share our appreciation of it. So, Dumatu. But let me just say, it is thanks to him and his persistence, and having been around Gananath and trying to get him to do something that he didn't want to do, I realized was often impossible. I can just say I have immense, overwhelming admiration for your dedication, your persistence, your kind of ability to kind of keep on saying, but when he was saying, no, and because of all of that, and you are an extraordinary filmmaker, but because of these other qualities, that we have the film that we now have today. So thank you very, very much.
First, I must thank Professor Charles Halise because today this occasion gave us a chance to speak and remember about Professor Gananath Obeyesekere. It is after 3 months he has passed away. And I must thank especially to American Institute for Lankan Studies because they organized this opportunity to remember Gananath Obeyesekere after 3 months. And I must thank once again because they helped us to get this film subtitled. Other thing I want to mention is that this film is a collective effort. We wanted to do this film because, some people mentioned here, Gananath Obeyesekere, especially among the Sinhala Buddhists, he is demonized among the Sinhala Buddhists. That is the problem in Sri Lanka. He is recognized as great anthropologist, but in Sri Lanka, especially he discussed his writings basically about Sinhala Buddhism, but he is, especially nationalist intellectuals, have demonized him, especially among Sinhala Buddhists. Especially we wanted to do this film to start a discussion about Gananath Obeyesekere in the Sinhala society. There are many writings written by Obeyesekere and written about Obeyesekere in Sri Lanka, but in English. But in Sinhala, very few translations Sri Lankan people have access to. So that is why we made this film. Thank you.